Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In this presentation, we are going to look at water resource management, and by the end of the session, we ought to have understood what water resource management is, describe the factors that affect water demand and supply, to explain how water distribution systems work, and to understand water resource governance, and to examine the relationship between water and climate change, and demonstrate the link between water and sustainable development goals that were put across by the UN for its member states in 2015. So, without further ado, let's dive into the water resource context as per now. The World Bank estimates that 40% of the world's population live in water scarce areas, and it projects that by 2040, an estimated 1 in 4 children will live in areas with extremely water shortages, and this is not good, especially for young people who are growing, who need water to support the activities that that enable their growth and development. And also, flood damages are estimated at around $120 billion per year. So the damages that are caused by floods are estimated to be at that figure, and this is only when you look at the property damage. But remember, floods do not damage only the property. Then, in the context of South Sudan, in 2021, the floods that happened affected about 1.2 million people, which caused displacement of 300,000 people and caused economic damages up to a tune of $671 million. So these things, the floods, of course, are risks due to water resource management, and we are learning about water resource management to see how we can mitigate such risks. So what is it when we talk about water resource management? We are referring to the planning, the development, and managing of water resources in terms of both water quantity and water quality, but also across all the uses that water is engaged in. So when we plan effectively, when we develop these water resource systems very well, when we manage water, then we are doing what we are calling water resource management. So it includes institutions, infrastructure, incentives, and information systems that support and guide water management. And this whole management of water resources ensures that there is sufficient water of good quality for drinking, sanitation services, food production, energy generation, as we shall see later in the sector uses, then inland water transport, water-based recreation, as well as sustaining healthy water-dependent ecosystems. So we acknowledge that water in itself supports ecosystems, the aquatic animals that live in there, the flora and fauna that obtain life from water or survive within the water ecosystem are well taken care of when there is good water resource management. So it is important to manage water, or the water resource, because it ensures that we have available, reliable, and sufficient water that is of recommended quality for the intended uses. For example, food production, recreation. When we talk about recreation, we are talking about things like swimming, skiing. So all those happen when there is enough water and of good quality. You do not want to swim in water and the next day you're complaining about bilharzia or schistosomiasis. So all these are enabled when there is good water resource management. Okay. Then when we have water resource management, we can also be sure to conserve and restore water dependent ecosystems. So sometimes we realize that the water dependent ecosystems have been destroyed because of inadequate water resource management. So when we put in place structures, frameworks, and activities that enable us to do better water resource management, then we can restore some of these water dependent ecosystems. In case they are not yet destroyed and you're still lucky, you can conserve them with a robust water resource management. Then it is essential in managing water related risks, including floods, drought, and contamination. So the understanding of water resource management as we are going to will help us to mitigate these water related risks. We shall know how to mitigate floods, to mitigate the effects of drought and contamination of water. Then also understanding the concept of water resource management or WRM will promote equitable and economically optimized water allocation, because these water risks, like we have seen, the drought, the floods, and contamination, always affect the vulnerable populations disproportionately. You find these people who are maybe poor, the refugees, always end up facing those adverse effects of these water risks. So, understanding the concept of water resource management will help us to economically allocate water resources and in an equitable way so that everyone gets uh, water in the way they need it. Okay. So the other importance is that it limits overconsumption and wastage of water, which is very essential in efficient water use. So a brief reminder of how we get water or how water moves around the earth and back is the hydrological cycle, and it describes water movement on, above, and below the surface of the earth. And you can see the main components there we are having is evaporation of this water from the surface water sources like lakes, oceans, rivers. Then we also have another contributing factor of transpiration, which is the other process of evaporation of the water from the plants or vegetation. Then when this happens, when this water vapor has risen to the clouds, when it has risen to the atmosphere, it condenses and it forms clouds. From the clouds, it can return back as a form of precipitation or rain. And then after it has rained, there will be that runoff either from that rain or sometimes when there is melting of the ice. So the hydrological cycle is very essential in ensuring that there is availability of water for all living organisms, and anything that affects it, anything that affects the transpiration, evaporation will ultimately lead to lower water availability in our ecosystems. Okay, so we want to understand this to appreciate the movement of water uh, in this hydrological cycle so that we can know where to put our interventions. Okay, if we are having less transpiration because of reduced vegetation cover, what can we do to improve the vegetation cover so that we can have more transpiration? if we are having less evaporation because of reduced surface water bodies, what intervention can we put in place to increase that? Okay, so that is the importance of the hydrological cycle, and from that we can also talk about water supply and demand. And when we talk about the water supply, we are referring to the provision of water by public utilities or the public water system, water distribution systems, commercial organizations, the community, or by individuals, usually through systems of pumps and pipes. Then the demand is the other side now, where we look at the volume of water required by users to satisfy their needs. And we saw the needs earlier. It can be for hygiene, for sanitation, for commercial, for industrial uses, for energy uses, as we shall see later on. So supplying is the provision of the water. Then the demand is now how much water people need to satisfy uh, what they are going to use it for. So the factors that affect water supply and demand are almost similar, but maybe an explanation of them will help you understand them better. So when we talk about water supply, like we said earlier, is the provision of water by those public utilities. So provision of water can be affected either by the climate or environmental factors. So if there is reduced, uh, if you have climate change like we are already having, then there is going to be an influence on water supply. Okay, those prolonged droughts that are happening end up reducing the water supply. Okay, when we have a lot of precipitation, sometimes we can have heightened water supply or too much water supply that sometimes can even cause floods. Okay, then we have infrastructure. We might be having enough water, but do we have uh, the required or sufficient infrastructure to deliver this water to the people? Okay, technology always enhances, of course, water supply because it makes it now easier to reach the people. So technology is always important in increasing or improving water supply, but it also enables efficient water use. Okay, with technology, we can have sensors that detect when water is not being used and then can cut off that supply. Then we have pollution. Pollution ultimately reduces the water supply because with pollution we get contaminated water, and this contaminated water cannot be supplied for use by people. Then geology, we are looking at the nature of rocks in our environment. So there are some rocks which are soft and will not hold water so that you have that surface water, but those which are hard will enable you to have more surface water bodies, and that will enable you to have more water supplied. Then over abstraction is getting a lot of water or too much water from underground to the extent of you reducing the groundwater. So sometimes you over drill wells or those boreholes, and they can cause a situation that is called over abstraction, and this reduces the water supply. Then water demand can be affected by factors like population density and distribution. So the more people are in an area, the more the demand of water. Technology also uh, affects water demand. So with the growing technology, especially in industries, you require more water to run that technology. Economics, in terms of water prices, the higher the price, the less the demand. Okay. Then environmental conditions can also uh, influence water demand. In this case, when there is a prolonged drought, when there is too much evaporation due to overheating, then people will demand water. Okay, there will be more demand because then people are more they are more likely to get thirsty. They are more likely to use more water for irrigation of their crops. Then the quality of water supplied also influences water demand. If the water quality is good, then people are most likely to demand more of that water. Okay, so earlier on we said we were going to talk about the water use sectors, and in this case, we have one of the largest water use sector is agriculture. In fact, it is the largest user of fresh water. It accounts for 70% of fresh water withdrawal. So when you look at agriculture, everything that takes place in agriculture requires water. Okay, so it is one of the biggest uh, water use sectors. And then we have other sectors like biodiversity, forestry, and ecosystems health, which also have like an interdependent relationship with water resources. They supply and also get from the water sector in terms in order to thrive. Okay, so for example, forests enable they create more transpiration, but also will limit runoff. Okay, their roots can trap that water and will limit runoffs. Then we have the climate adaptation and mitigation sector. Is enabled. It enables cost-effective climate adaptation and climate change mitigation. So it is also a very important sector in terms of water use. Then wash or the water and water sanitation and hygiene sector heavily relies on water use on availability of water for drinking, for hygiene, for sanitation. Those sanitation systems like the sewage systems, flushing of toilets, making sure that people can bathe with adequate water. That is a very essential sector in terms of water use. Then energy, one of the most common energy sources, which is hydroelectricity, is dependent on water. We depend on water to create that energy through turning of the turbines that lead to generation of that electricity. Industries also are heavily dependent on water for cooling, but also for those production processes. So those are the water use sectors, and we could have more. All right. Now we look at water conservation and efficiency, which refers to those techniques or processes that reduce or eliminate water wastage and promote efficient use. So we've acknowledged that water is very essential in our lives. One of the most essential basic needs that we have. Okay, so we need to conserve it. We need to use it economically. And how do we do that? We have a few techniques here. For example, gray water recycling. So when you take a bath, when you wash your face, that water should not be disposed of, okay? Just like that. It can be reused in toilet flushing, it can also be treated and be used in irrigation. So that water, which is called grey water, can be reused, and in so doing, we shall be conserving water or using it efficiently. Then rainwater harvesting. Uh, when there is rainwater, instead of letting it just go, you can harvest it with by putting in place gutters and maybe a water tank to harvest this water, and it can be used in various ways for washing, for irrigation, other and other uses. Then efficient irrigation systems like the smart irrigation controllers, which utilize sensors to detect changes in precipitation or temperature and prevent overwatering. So when you're irrigating and you have these smart irrigation controllers, when it rains, then the irrigation or the irrigation pump will be cut off, okay? When there is reduced temperature, then it will also be cut off so that you can save or conserve water. Then the other techniques of water conservation include pressure reducing valves. In the distribution systems, you should be having these pressure reducing valves. You shouldn't be having uh, a lot of pressure even when you do not need that pressure, which can lead to wastage of water. So these control water pressure to a predetermined level which you need, and also lead to water conservation. Then we have efficient toilet systems, which instead of using a lot of water to flush, you use little water but with a higher velocity or with a higher speed. So gone are the days where people used to be having uh, water systems or toilet systems which use a lot of water, and nowadays, because you want to conserve or to use water efficiently, they use uh, little water but with higher velocity to do the flushing. Then increasing forest cover, like we saw, one of the elements of the hydrological cycle is transpiration, which occurs after evaporation of water from the plants or the vegetation cover. So increasing forest cover ultimately will lead to more water in that hydrological cycle. Better methods of agriculture that conserve water, for example, composting and mulching, are also essential in water conservation and efficiency. All right. So as we go on, we want to also look at water allocation and distribution. And when we talk about allocation of water, we are looking at that apportionating or, or, or supplying in terms of quality and quantity and timing of water resources between and within uh, different sectors and for different uses. So we are looking at how can we divide this water resource amongst ourselves? How can we give each of us enough water according to our needs, okay? Then in water distribution, we are looking at transportation of water from where it is being treated to where they need it, okay? Whether it is in domestic use, industrial use, commercial use, or other needs like aesthetic needs and recreation needs. So water allocation methods, to begin with, we have a couple of techniques of water allocation, or we have a lot of methods which we can use to allocate water. One of them is the one in which the state controls this water allocation, or it is called the public allocation. So in this case, because the state has that jurisdiction or control over all sectors of the economy, it can choose to take full control of water allocation. Okay, so in this case, when the state maybe assigns its ministry or its agency to do this water allocation, we can be sure that we are going to have equity and environmental protection, because there is that guiding eye, there is that guiding authority of the state, which will make sure that water is equitably allocated, everyone is served equally, and then we have environmental protection even in this allocation of water, rather than focusing on just economic efficiency. Okay. Then another allocation method that we have is user-based allocation, which is undertaken through collective management of water sources, supplying water for either collective or individual use. So sometimes at those lower levels, we can have water allocation, which is managed by the users themselves. Okay, so you find, for example, a village managed local water supply. Okay, you can have a well that is managed by the village. They determine whether when to perhaps access this water source, how much can you take at a time, when to maintain it and how to maintain it, the user fees, all this is determined by the users themselves and not the state. So that in that case, we shall term it as user-based allocation. Then we have market-based allocation, and in this case, it is just determined by the forces of demand and supply. So if you have a lot of money, you can purchase a lot, and if you have little money, you will purchase little water. Okay, so you can imagine in that case, people who are economically disadvantaged will be at a disadvantage in this case. Okay, so it encourages, yes, efficient use of water, and it is flexible and responsive in allocation, but it doesn't cater for equity. And sometimes, due to a lot of demand, you can end up having environmental degradation. So the market-based allocation, which by the way is common in a lot of settings, will tend to always damage the environment, but also encourage inequity in terms of water allocation. Then water distribution systems, which we have a couple of them, are designed based on the following principles. One of them is that when you're supplying water, it should be supplied with sufficient pressure. Okay. Then when you're also supplying this water and there is a breakage, or there are maintenance works which are supposed to be done, or repairing of that water distribution system, it should be designed in a way that water supply is not disturbed. Okay, yes, you're repairing, but it shouldn't disturb water supply. Then it must be watertight to reduce leakage of water, which can cause wastage. Then the distribution pipe must be laid 1 meter away or above the sewer lines to avoid contamination. And the quality of water must not be compromised in the distribution pipes. So quality. When you're distributing water, you must ensure that the quality of water is not compromised. Okay, so the pipes should be it should be laid in a way that do not encourage contamination of this water that is being distributed. So we have around 4 distribution systems, one of them being the dead end system. Then we have the radio system, then grid iron system, and the ring system. So you're going to look at them in more detail, but a brief highlight on each of them is that when you look at the dead end system, it is basically uh, it is called dead end because this main pipe, which is that bold black line, is connected to the sub mains, which later go to the sub branches, but they never return. Okay, they are not connected back to this main pipe, and that is why we are calling it the dead end system. Okay, so in that case, you can expect some of the advantages to be that it is easy to put in place, and but the disadvantage can be stagnation because you're not having water coming back to this main pipe, which can drain it or take it back to the mains. So there can be the problem of stagnation due to many dead ends. Then we have a grid iron system. So in that grid iron system, um, you're having the main pipe and then the sub main and then the branches which are interconnected to each other in a form of a grid system. Okay, as you can see in that pictorial representation on the extreme left. Okay, so there is that main pipe with that bold black line, and then we have the sub main which runs from the main pipe, and then the branches which run from the sub mains, and they all are interconnected. Okay, so this system ultimately, since we do not have dead ends, or since we have interconnections with each other, then water is continuously flowing, so you do not have a problem of stagnation. And also, because of not having those dead ends, then that means that repair work does not have to disrupt water flow. So water can still be flowing and you do repair work because of those interconnections. The disadvantage, obviously, is that uh, you need valves, or those cut-off valves, because of that water. Because water is continuously flowing, you do not want wasted. So that is why you need valves, and the pipes need to be long enough. Okay. Then when we look at the ring system, now the ring system is almost the same as the grid iron system, though for it is having that main pipe running all over the place. Okay, so it in this place the whole system is enclosed by the main pipe in a radial or rectangular form, as you can see in that figure that has been put in the middle. Okay, the advantage, of course, of this ring system is that the discharge rate is high. Okay, when compared to other distribution system, because you can see the main pipe going all over the place, so it is surrounding the whole system, and this means that you will have discharge rate or supply of water higher than the other systems. Okay, and because we do not also have that problem of end of dead ends, then this system we also do not have stagnation of water. Uh, Disadvantages, is not easy to put in place, but also requires valves like we saw in the grid iron system, and it requires a lot of skill to put in place. Okay, then when you look at the other system, which is called the radio system, it is as you can see, we have a main pipe, and then we are having supply to some kind of reservoir tanks. Okay, so the main water supply pipeline is connected to distribution reservoir, where water can be held for some time, or a storage tank which is kept in the middle of each zone. Okay, then the supply of pipes are laid radially or in that radial fashion to all directions, from distribution reservoir to the households. Okay, so the advantage is that it is most suitable for high-rise buildings, or these buildings which are having a lot of stories. So if you have a storied building, then you would want to go for this radio system, where the main pipe will supply to these reservoir tanks, and it's from these reservoir tanks that individual households can obtain their water. Disruption of water supply during maintenance is also not common here. So you can still have water even when they are repairing, and it offers quick service, because remember, we are having these reservoir tanks which are always holding water at any time you need it. Um, the disadvantage could be the fact that you need more connections, as you can see in the figure on the extreme right. Then it requires more length of pipe laying systems. You require more pipes in this case, but it is also not economical, as a number of distribution reservoirs is more. So that is the problem with this reservoir, with this radio system. So the takeaway message, as far as water distribution systems, is that different water distribution systems work in different settings. So the choice of the best distribution system will depend on what situation you are in, but also perhaps the money that you have to put it in place, and the kind of expertise that is that is at your disposal to put it in place and maintain it. Okay. Next, we look at water pricing and tariffs. This is majorly concerned with how expensive is water, okay, or what price is the water resource attached. So when we look at, for example, this tariff guide by the National Water and Sewerage Corporation of Uganda, we see that 20 liters, a 20-liter jerrycan, which is one of the most common water container, at domestic level or individual households, they sell it at Ugandan shillings 99, which is approximately 3.4 South Sudanese pounds. That is when we use this rate of 1 South Sudanese pound equaling to 29.29 Ugandan shillings. Then at that rate also, if you own a small industry, they are going to charge you Uganda shillings 118, which is approximately South Sudanese pound 4. And if you have a bigger industrial, if you're engaged in bigger industry work, or you're using a lot of water, then they charge you less. So at that point, they charge you almost just 2 South Sudanese pounds, which is equivalent to Ghana shillings 59. Then they have a very good system of which favors the poor, the ones that they are calling the urban poor, or the people who are poor but live in urban areas. So in this case, for them to access water in a way that does not affect the environment, but also putting them at health risk, they make the water to be cheaper. So they sell it at approximately uh, one South Sudani pound, or which is an equivalent of Ugandan shilling 25. All these are in terms of a 20-liter jerry can. Okay, so that those are the prices. So you might think that these prices are too low, but sometimes some people might not afford this. Okay, so imagine if a family uses 20-liter jerry cans of like 10 of them in a day. So if it is not an urban poor family, then it will require 10 times approximately 100 Uganda shillings, and that will be 1,000. So 1,000 every day can be a lot of money in the long run. Okay, so water pricing and tariffs is a very important topic when we are talking about water resource management, because it enables us to understand whether all people are accessing water in an equitable way. Is there a discrepancy between the poor and the rich in terms of water access or not because of this water pricing? Then water resource governance is that overall framework and process of decision making and implementation of policies related to use and management of water resources. It involves a wide range of actors, including the central and local governments, non-government organizations, the communities that are receiving water, the private sector, and it helps in ensuring that water resources meet the needs of the multiple stakeholders, including households, businesses, and the environment. So when we look at water governance, we are looking at how all the actors at the different levels of government play their roles in ensuring that the water resource is managed in an equitable and environmentally friendly way. So the institutional arrangement for water management that exists in most countries of the sub-Saharan region is that you will always have at national level the ministries, those the ministries of water, environment, local government, agriculture having a big stake in terms of water management, and they will do the monitoring and assessment. They will plan and regulate how water is used. They will put in place laws and enforce them, but also they will build the capacity of the people that represent them at lower levels. Okay. Then at regional level, we have technical support units to support those at national level. We have water management zones, we have the private sector, we have NGOs at regional level, and all they do is quality assurance and guidance. They advise and facilitate um, people at the lower level, and then they also do planning and regulation, but also do monitoring and assessment of water projects. Then at community level, where we have the district local government, the community-based organizations, and other non-government organizations, we have implementation of the infrastructure programs that are put in place by those higher level institutions, but we also have creating and raising awareness. Then we have accountability in terms of the projects that have been put in place by either the state or the regional institutions. So that is how water resource management is arranged in terms of the institutions. Then stakeholder participation in water governance is very important to ensure that there is effective water resource planning. You have to involve each and every one that is concerned with the water resource, including the local, the regional, the national government entities, and the institutions that represent a full range of water users. And when we talk about the full range of water users, we basically need to ensure that we include women, we include youth, we include persons with disabilities, the indigenous people who are often underrepresented in decision making, and yet they are the ones who are most vulnerable to water risks, okay? Because women are always engaged in water dependent activities of the households, they need to be engaged because they have that unique knowledge about water resources, okay? The uses, the sources, and what affects the water resource, okay? Then the youth sometimes are very essential in taking up new technologies which might be shunned by the older people. So when you're introducing something new, you need to involve the youth because it is more likely to succeed when you do that. So that is why stakeholder involvement is very essential. Then there is this phenomenon of integrated water resource management that is very important in overall water resource management, and it is basically the process of promoting a coordinated development and management of water, land, soil, and other related natural resources in order to maximize the resultant economic and social welfare in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems. That is according to the United Nations. So, implementing this integrated water resource management helps us to protect the world's environment, but it also fosters economic growth because it is integrated. It looks at multiple facets that affect and are affected by the water resource. So, it helps to protect the world's environment, it fosters economic growth, it leads to sustainable development, and basically also because it involves stakeholder participation, it will promote democratic participation in governance and improves human health because of having adequate water of sufficient quality. So, the framework that has been put in place by the United Nations involves water resource issue assessment, where you assess the general situation of the water resource in a particular area. Then, after assessing, you can put in place a favorable environment by by formulating policies and strategies to do that. Then, these strategies and policies will help you to put in place an implementation plan of integrated water resource management, which will not only focus on water but also look at land, also look at soil and other natural resources which have to be protected so that the water resource is of sufficient quality and quantity. Then after you've put in place an implementation plan, now you have to implement. So the actions of implementation come into play. But these days, we cannot only implement and let it go. We have to monitor the progress of every project, of every program. So we do monitoring and evaluation of the progress so that we can have an enabling environment, we can have better water resource management, which is hinged on institutional structures, management instruments, infrastructure management, and development, and an environment that is enabling by having those suitable policies and frameworks that support all those resources that we talked about: water, soil, land, because it is all those resources that come into play to ensure that there is integrated water resource management. Then, as we come to the end of this presentation, we have to talk about climate change and water resources, but also we need to have a brief highlight on the Sustainable Development Goals as promised in the objectives of the session. So when we look at the climate change and water resources, we acknowledge that climate change in itself is a water crisis. Its effects are felt through the worsening floods, the rising ocean levels that are caused by that increased volume of the water in the oceans, which has been due to overheating of the planet over the recent years. And then we have wildfires and droughts. So the impact in full of the climate change on water resources can take forms of increased evaporation rates. Because of that increased temperature, then we are always going to have increased evaporation rates, higher precipitation rates received as rain or snow, also due to the general increase of temperature in the atmosphere. Then we have decreased water quality due to heavy downpours. So when you have higher precipitation, you will have heavy downpours. Okay, so when it rains, there's always a lot of rain, and this a lot of rain will increase the runoffs. And when there are a lot of runoffs, we can expect to have a lot of water contamination due to water going through the fields, taking with it pesticides and fertilizers, which can contaminate the water. Then we have increased water temperatures, which leads to those first two effects, and changes in water demand. Since there is a higher temperature and increased evaporation, people will need more water to drink, but also to facilitate their water dependent activities like farming. Okay, so how do we adapt now to this changing climate? We can use modern irrigation infrastructure, which utilizes, like we had seen earlier, those sensors that can conserve water. But we can also use irrigation infrastructure like the drip irrigation, which doesn't use a lot of water. Then we can put in place or develop climate change resistant crops, which even during the prolonged droughts can thrive. Okay. Then dam construction will act as a water conservation. It will act as a water conservation strategy, but we have to be careful when we are constructing these dams, because sometimes you construct dams in a careless manner and you end up having effects like floods. Okay. Then we also have wetland restoration. Okay. Ultimately, when you restore wetlands, you're going to have the climate change effects kind of reduced or reversed. Then integrated water resource management, where you manage all the other sectors alongside all the other natural resources alongside water, like the land and the soil, where you manage them together and you make sure that you involve all the stakeholders to participate in a democratic way. Then we can adapt, or we can thrive even when the climate is changing. Then reducing the vulnerability of those people who are faced with the adverse effects of the climate change can lead to adaptation in that in that way. So we do this by basically building their adaptive capacity and resilience. Okay, ensuring that there is enough information about impending climate change effects. If there is drought that is about to take place, can we have in place early warning systems? Can we equip people with enough food to take them through such times. Okay. Then facilitating the integration of climate change adaptation into new and existing policies, programs, and activities. Every intervention that we put in place should have that component of climate change adaptation. Every policy that we put in place should have that embedment of climate change and adaptation, so that climate change can be dealt with in an integrated way. Then improved water forecasting capacity, like I had said, drainage and food and flood management is also another adaptation strategy in the changing climate. So when we have in place measures that can promote drainage and manage floods, then we are going to effectively adapt even when there is climate change. So while the water sector might be having a lot of issues, but it can also cause issues. Okay, so sometimes due to processes of water treatment, we always have greenhouse gases, or which we are calling GHG, and these could include methane and carbon dioxide. But how do we reduce these gases so that the water resource, the water sector does not contribute again to the climate change that affects it? So we can have innovative technology to reduce greenhouse emissions. So innovation always brings in place techniques that can utilize, for example, use of algae instead of those other microorganisms that can cause this emission of methane. Then we can also modify the operating conditions and wastewater characterization. We can use cleaner sources of energy that lead to reduced greenhouse gas emission. For example, if you use solar energy, wind energy, then we can have reduced greenhouse gases produced from water treatment. Then lastly, in this session, we are going to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and water resources, and in particular, the Sustainable Development Goal that is concerned with water is Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which talks about ensuring access to water and sanitation for all by 2030. So access to water, sanitation, and hygiene is recognized as a human right, and the strategies to achieve this goal include increasing sector-wide investment. If you have increased investment, that means that all people can be able to get water that they need. Okay, capacity building to ensure that water is used efficiently. Then promoting innovation so as to also improve water conservation and also make available more water. And then evidence-based action, we have to use research so as to put in place measures to mitigate these effects of climate change that affect water. Enhancing cross-sectoral coordination, involve other sectors that have a direct and an indirect effect on the water resource. Then cooperation among all stakeholders, as we saw, is very essential in water resource management. Then if you realize that water shortages and have an effect on food security, incomes of rural farmers, while improving this water management can improve national economies through enhancing agriculture, the food sectors, and this will lead to more resilience to water variability and ability to fulfill the needs of a growing population. Because with a growing population, there will be more demand of water. Okay, So we need to supply water, and this can only be done with robust water resource management techniques. So protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems and biodiversity can ensure water purification and water quality standards. So in conclusion of all this water resource management session, we need to focus on holistic and inclusive water resource management, because that will be crucial for optimizing water allocation in an equitable way, for improving water quality and quantity, so that we can have more water demand, okay, which can also be met, and then reducing vulnerability to flooding, drought, and chronic water scarcity that is worsened by climate change. So effective water resource management is enabled by strong governance at all levels and the institutions, robust planning informed by data analysis and monitoring and evaluation, and then stakeholder participation. So when we do this, we shall have better water resource management. Thank you so much for listening to this, and I will catch you on the next one.